And when I meditate, I get into a certain state of mind where I'm almost hyper receptive to any impressions that I feel. And these impressions come through physically, they come through emotionally, sometimes they'll even come through as memories that aren't mine.
1 week after Tyler Henry got married, doctors cut into his brain. He was 30 years old. Fans thought they already knew the love of his life. They had seen the wedding. They had seen the husband. Then Tyler said something that flipped the whole story. The only love of his life was not the man he married. It was a woman who had believed him when nobody else would. Her name is Teresa. And the first time she proved it, there were no cameras in the room. The kitchen in Hanford, California was small. The table sat too close to the counter. The window fogged up every winter morning. Tyler was 10 when he sat down at that table and told his mother his grandmother was going to die. He did not cry. He did not whisper. He said it the way a child talks about the weather. Flat. Certain. Already finished. Most parents would have told him to stop talking like that. Teresa pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She did not scold him. She asked him what else he saw. Within days the phone rang. His grandmother had passed. Teresa held her son that night. And she never once, not that night or any night after, told him to be quiet about what he could see. Think about that for a second. If your 10-year-old child looked you in the eye and predicted a death, would you believe him? Or would you tell him to stop? Let us know in the comments. That choice did not stay inside the kitchen. The town of Hanford found out. And Hanford did not treat it like a gift. Word moved through the streets the way it does in a small town. Fast. And not kind. Adults began looking at Tyler differently. Some of them treated what he saw as something to fear. Tyler has said that grown people in town reacted as if he was dangerous, not something to understand. He was still in elementary school. He did not fully understand what was happening. He only knew that his mother's jaw got tight every time someone brought it up at the grocery store. But things were about to get harder. High school was coming. And high school would not be kinder. That was only the beginning of the life Teresa would have to protect. Because the boy who could see other people's endings still had no idea what his own life was about to become. Fame. A family secret that would break his mother open. A man who would find him through someone else's grief. And 2 surgeries that would put him on a table while the people who loved him sat in a hallway and waited. None of that existed yet. All Teresa knew in that small kitchen was that her son had told her something impossible. And she had chosen to believe him instead of walking away. What she did next would decide whether Tyler Henry ever became Tyler Henry at all. High school found new ways to make Tyler feel like he did not belong. It was not just whispers anymore. It was hallways, classrooms, corners where nobody could see. Tyler has spoken openly about being bullied specifically for what he could see. Classmates did not just mock him. Some of them cornered him. They wanted to test whether it was real. They wanted to watch him squirm. And when he could not perform on demand, they laughed. When he could, they got scared and laughed harder. He came home quieter than usual on those days. He would walk through the front door, set down his backpack and say nothing. But Teresa always noticed. She clocked it before he even sat down. She had been reading her son since he was 10 years old. She did not need him to explain. What she gave him was not a solution. She could not walk into that school and fix it. What she gave him instead was a Saturday. Every week, she drove him to a bookstore across town. In the back room of that store, Tyler had started doing readings. $5 at first. Then 10. Nothing glamorous. Just a quiet room, a chair, and a boy who could sense things most people could not explain. Teresa did not push him inside and drive away. Sometimes she sat in the car and waited. Other times she stood near the door, close enough to hear him, far enough to let the room belong to him. She understood something most parents would have missed. He did not need her to run it. He needed her to show up. What happened next shocked everyone who had written him off. Those small readings started growing. Word spread, but this time it spread in the right direction. People began talking about the boy in the back room of that bookstore. Not with fear. With curiosity. With something close to wonder. Tyler was still a teenager. He had not figured out who he was yet. But in that back room, surrounded by strangers who needed something he could give, he started to understand what he was for. After graduation, he enrolled in college in Fresno. His plan was hospice nursing. He wanted to sit with people in their hardest moments. If the world was going to see him as strange no matter what, he decided he might as well do something that mattered with it. Teresa signed the paperwork without a single question. She did not try to talk him into something safer or more traditional. She trusted the direction he was already moving in. Nobody expected what came next. Because while Tyler was studying hospice care in Fresno, a television producer picked up a phone. And the call that came through was not about nursing. It was about the Kardashians. It was about national television. And it was about to pull a quiet boy from a small California town into a spotlight so big that neither he nor his mother had any idea how to prepare for it. Teresa had believed him in a kitchen with no audience. She was about to believe him in front of millions. But before that happened, there was one more person in that house who deserves to be named. Someone who never appeared on camera, never gave an interview, never posted his side of the story. And yet he was there every single day nobody was filming. His name was David. And his version of love looked completely different from Teresa's. But it was just as steady. The call came in 2015. A producer wanted Tyler on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. The idea was simple. Tyler would sit across from the Kardashian sisters and connect with their late father on national television. Millions of people would be watching. It was the kind of opportunity that either launched a career or ended one before it started. Teresa said yes before Tyler had even finished repeating the offer back to her. That one moment told you everything about who she was. She had been saying yes to her son since he was 10 years old. This was just the biggest version of the same answer. Within months, an executive at E! Was talking about giving Tyler his own show. By January 2016, Hollywood Medium had a premiere date. The boy who had spent his teenage years being cornered in hallways was suddenly being fitted for wardrobe on a studio lot in Los Angeles. The back room of a bookstore had become a television set. The $5 readings had become a network deal. And Teresa drove him to that first table read. She sat off to the side in a folding chair nobody had reserved for her. She brought her own coffee. She watched producers walk her son through camera marks and blocking like she was hearing a new language for the first time. Nobody handed her a script. Nobody told her where to sit or how long to stay. She stayed anyway. The requests came in fast after the show launched. What started as a few hundred viewer messages grew into thousands within a single season. Tyler was filming most weekdays, sometimes long into the evening, sitting across from strangers who needed to know if the people they had lost were still somehow close. The sessions were emotionally heavy. Every single one of them cost something. Teresa was there for most of those days. Just outside the frame. Handing him water between takes. Watching monitors she was still learning to understand. She had spent years learning the rhythm of a backroom bookstore. Now she was learning the rhythm of a Hollywood set. But she had not left her real life behind to do it. Before we reveal what happened next, subscribe to this channel. Because stories like this prove that the people behind the famous ones are often carrying just as much. And this story is only getting heavier. Most mornings that year, Teresa was at the family tile business before 8 in the morning. Going through invoices. Scheduling installations. Working alongside her husband David, who remained exactly what he had always been. Steady. Present. Completely out of the spotlight and completely unbothered by that fact. By early afternoon she would drive across town to sit through hair, makeup and rehearsal until the shoot wrapped for the night. Nobody asked her to carry both worlds at once. She just did. Without complaint. Without putting either one down. In November of 2017, after one particularly long filming day, she posted online that she should probably hold on to her day job just in case the television thing did not work out. It was half a joke. But it also told you something real about the woman underneath the proud mother. She never fully let herself believe the ground was solid. She just kept walking on it anyway. The criticism came that same year. Strangers on the internet accused Tyler of profiting off other people's grief. Some of them used words like predator without blinking. Teresa read some of it late at night after Tyler had gone to sleep. She said nothing about it the next morning. She just showed up at the next call time 30 minutes early. Because 30 minutes early was just what she did now. But nobody in that world, not the producers, not the fans, not the critics, could have predicted what was coming next. It had nothing to do with Hollywood. It had nothing to do with readings or cameras or celebrity guests. It started with a small package that Teresa ordered online one afternoon between filming blocks. A DNA testing kit. She mailed it off without expecting much. She was just curious. 6 weeks later, an email arrived that turned her entire understanding of who she was completely upside down. And this time, Tyler Henry, the man who had spent years telling strangers what was coming, did not see it coming at all. The email landed on a Tuesday. Teresa opened it alone. She was sitting at the same kitchen table where her 10-year-old son had once told her his grandmother was going to die. The same small room. The same fogged window. But what she read on that screen made everything she thought she knew about herself feel suddenly unstable. The results were clear. The woman who had raised her, a woman named Stella Guidry Nestle, shared no biological connection to Teresa at all. She was not her real mother. Teresa sat with that for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and called Tyler. He drove over within the hour. No hesitation. No questions first. He just came. Together they started pulling at threads neither of them had expected to find. What they uncovered underneath the DNA results was not just a missing birth record. It was something far darker. Stella, the woman Teresa had believed was her mother her entire life, had been convicted decades earlier of torturing and murdering 2 people. She had served roughly 30 years in prison before her release. The woman who raised Teresa was not just a stranger by blood. She was someone with a violent and devastating history. Most of us will never have to sit across from our own mother and realize she was never really our mother at all. But many of us know what it feels like to have the ground shift beneath us without any warning. That moment when everything you believe turns out to be something else entirely. If you have ever felt that, you already understand what Teresa was sitting with at that table. Tyler tried to do for his mother what he had done for hundreds of strangers over the years. He closed his eyes at that same kitchen table and reached. He searched for a name, a memory, a face, anything solid that he could hand her. Nothing came. He would later admit that when it came to the people closest to him, the clarity he trusted with strangers simply disappeared. He was too tangled up in wanting a specific answer to trust whatever he was actually sensing. For the first time since he was 10 years old, Tyler was not the one offering comfort from a place of certainty. He was sitting beside his mother, just as lost as she was. And for once, it was Teresa holding steady for both of them. What happened next shocked everyone who heard the story. So they did it the slow way. No beatings. No readings. Just public records, newspaper archives, and 2 people determined to find something real. A stranger's name slowly turned into a city. A city turned into a state. Louisiana. New Orleans. A birth record that had been buried for decades finally surfaced. They found biological relatives Teresa had never known existed. And months later, the 2 of them traveled together to meet them in person. Teresa would later describe that meeting as bittersweet in the truest sense of the word. She said she loved her newfound family immediately. That they were warm and wonderful people. But underneath the joy there was a grief she had not expected. A quiet ache for the childhood she might have had if things had gone differently. For the years that could not be given back. She also said something that stopped people cold when they heard it. She said finding out Stella was not her real mother felt like relief. She was glad, in her own words, that her son did not carry the blood of a woman capable of what Stella had done. Think about what that sentence holds. A mother protecting her child even from something that existed only in genetics. Even from something nobody could control. There is something almost impossible about the full picture. The boy who had built an entire career telling strangers their loved ones were still watching over them did not see this one coming in his own kitchen. The gift that worked on everyone else went completely quiet for the person who needed it most. But the story was not finished. Not even close. Because while Tyler and Teresa were still processing everything they had uncovered, something else had already been quietly growing in Tyler's personal life. Something that had started years earlier with a stranger's grief and a television screen and a man named Clint who reached out asking for a reading. And what came out of that reading was something Tyler Henry never predicted for himself either. In 2016, a photographer named Clint Godwin was sitting at home watching television. He saw a young medium on Keeping Up with the Kardashians doing a reading for the sisters about their late father. Something about Tyler stayed with Clint after the screen went dark. He could not fully explain it. It felt like unfinished business. Like something that needed a follow-up. So he reached out and asked for a reading. Tyler had done hundreds of sessions by that point. He had sat across from grieving strangers more times than he could count. But something about this one felt different from the very first minute. As Tyler connected with Clint, he found himself face to face with the death of Clint's grandfather, a man who had recently taken his own life. Tyler did not just relay information. He found the exact reasons why. He went deep into a grief that most people never let anyone else touch. Within minutes, Tyler was not delivering a reading anymore. He was standing inside someone else's pain. And somehow, without either of them knowing it yet, he was also standing at the beginning of his own future. What happened next nobody expected. What started as a session slowly became something else entirely. A conversation. A connection. Then something that neither of them had a word for yet. 4 years after that first reading, in 2018, Tyler and Clint made their first public appearance together. They walked a red carpet at a movie screening in matching button-down shirts. They did not look like a celebrity couple performing for cameras. They looked like 2 people who had simply known each other for a long time and were comfortable showing it. Away from the cameras, they built something that looked defiantly ordinary. A home in Topanga. 2 dogs and a bird. Weekends spent surfing instead of chasing headlines. Tyler has said that when he came home, the reading stayed at the door. Whatever he carried from those sessions, whatever emotional weight came with sitting inside other people's grief all day, he left it outside. Inside that house they simply lived. The way anyone else did. Clint did not stay on the outside of Tyler's family either. He moved toward them. By 2018, Clint had already started calling Teresa his other mother. That same year, on his 22nd birthday, Teresa made him a cake. Funfetti. Candles spelling out the number. Clint posted it online with a caption thanking her for everything she did. It was not a performance. It was just a man genuinely grateful for a woman who had opened her family to him without conditions. And when the DNA results tore Teresa's sense of identity apart, Tyler later said that Clint stepped in with a kind of steadiness nobody had asked him to provide. He was not obligated to sit with a family processing a generational secret that had nothing to do with him. He just did. Because that was who he was. Most of us may never fall in love the way Tyler did, through a grief reading that turned into a decade-long relationship. But most of us understand what it means to find someone who does not run when things get heavy. Someone who shows up not because they have to but because leaving never even crosses their mind. That kind of love is rare. And Tyler found it in a man who first came to him carrying someone else's loss. Somewhere in those quiet years together, a proposal happened. Nobody knows exactly when. Back in 2019, a reporter had asked Tyler directly if marriage was somewhere in his future. True to the man who spent his career giving other people certainty, he offered none for himself. He only said that if it happened he would probably be the one to ask. When he finally did ask, there was no camera there to catch it. No engagement post followed. No ring reveal. No he said yes moment shared with fans. For two people who had lived so much of their relationship in public view, the one part they chose to keep completely private was the part where it actually became forever. Then on May 7, 2025, Tyler married Clint at a courthouse in Beverly Hills. He wrote afterward that life with Clint felt like an endless sleepover with his best friend. That he had known nearly a decade earlier this was the one. He called it his best premonition yet. It was the happiest sentence Tyler Henry had ever written in public. And exactly 1 week later, everything changed. 1 week after the wedding, the headaches came back. Tyler had been here before. Back in 2014, when he was just 18 years old and nobody outside his family knew his name, he had gone in for an MRI after weeks of headaches that would not quit. Doctors found a cyst near the center of his brain and removed it. No cameras. No public watching. No fans sending messages. Just a frightened teenager and the people who loved him sitting in a hospital and waiting for news that could have gone either way. That chapter had closed quietly. Tyler rarely talked about it. Most of his audience did not even know it had happened until years later. But now it was 2025. He was 30 years old. He had just gotten married 7 days ago. And the headaches were back. An MRI confirmed what nobody wanted to hear. The cyst had returned. It was larger this time. Doctors identified it as a colloid tumor and told him it needed to come out immediately. There was no waiting. There was no second opinion window. It was emergency surgery. Nobody expected what came next. Tyler posted from his hospital bed days after the procedure. He was smiling in the photo. He wrote that he felt thankful to be surrounded by his family. He said it was not his first rodeo. He kept his voice light in the caption the way people do when they are trying to hold everyone else steady while quietly processing something enormous themselves. Doctors ordered a full month of bed rest. For a man who had spent years sitting across from other people in their most vulnerable moments, being the one lying in the hospital bed was a different kind of experience entirely. He was used to being the one with answers. The one who could sense what was coming. The one who offered comfort from a place of knowing. This time he was the one who did not know. And the people who loved him were the ones left waiting for news. Teresa did not need to be told where the hospital was. She had been finding her way to the people she loved for 30 years. She just showed up. The way she always had. The way she had shown up at the bookstore. At the television set. At the kitchen table when the DNA results arrived. Showing up was not something Teresa decided to do in a crisis. It was simply who she was. But she was not alone in that corridor this time. Clint sat 2 chairs down. He had posted the updates that fans were waiting for, keeping his words calm and steady in the captions while everything underneath them was anything but. He wrote that Tyler was surrounded by love. That the procedure had gone well. That they were taking it one day at a time. Neither Teresa nor Clint needed the other to explain anything. They already understood. 2 people who loved the same man in completely different ways, sitting in the same hallway, not needing to fill the silence. Then 6 months later in November the swelling returned. Tyler underwent a second brain procedure within the same year. The same year he got married. The same year he finally had the life he had quietly been building for almost a decade. Clint posted the update when it was over. He wrote that Tyler's follow-up procedure was very successful. Then he added something that felt like a private thought turned into a public prayer. He wrote that they say the third time is the charm. It was the kind of sentence only someone living inside the fear could write. Hopeful and exhausted at the same time. For a man who had spent an entire career telling other people what was coming, nobody could tell him how this chapter ended. Not his doctors. Not his fans. And not even Tyler himself. The gift that had defined his entire life went completely quiet when he needed it most. He was the one on the table now. And the two people who loved him most were the ones left reading the signs and hoping they meant something good. But here is what those two surgeries revealed that no camera had ever captured before. In that hospital corridor, across two procedures in a single year, Tyler learned something he had not expected to learn about himself. He had spent years carefully measuring out his emotions, protecting himself, keeping certain things close and certain things quiet. But lying in a hospital bed with your new husband and your mother sitting in the hallway outside, you stop rationing. You stop holding back. You let yourself be loved completely because the alternative is too heavy to carry. And that realization, quiet and private and earned through something no one would have chosen, became the foundation of the answer he had been carrying all along. He had been saying it for years. Most people just were not listening closely enough. It was never one dramatic confession under studio lights. It was scattered across interviews and captions and small moments that most people scrolled past without stopping. A line on a talk show here. A birthday post there. A sentence in an interview that sounded simple on the surface but carried everything underneath it. Back in 2022, 3 years before any of the surgeries, 3 years before the wedding, Tyler sat across from an interviewer and said something that most people treated as a throwaway line. He said it might sound stereotypical, but his mom was his best friend. That she got him and he got her. That they were beyond the point of just being polite to each other. Beyond the performance of a good mother and son relationship. They had moved into something rarer and harder to name. Nobody clipped that moment. Nobody made it go viral. It sat quietly in an interview that most fans watched once and forgot. But that was the answer. It had always been the answer. Teresa Colwin was the first person who chose Tyler Henry before Tyler Henry was anything. Before the show. Before the readings. Before the celebrity guests and the network deals and the hospital corridors and the wedding. She chose him in a small kitchen in Hanford, California when he was 10 years old and told her something impossible. And she kept choosing him every single day after that without ever making him feel like a burden for needing to be chosen. That is not a small thing. That is everything. And then there was Clint. The love that arrived later. The love that looked completely different and mattered just as deeply. Tyler wrote about him in February of 2025, just 3 months before they stood together at the Beverly Hills courthouse. He wrote that he and Clint had grown up together. That there was no one else he would rather move through time with. That whether he was 29 or 92, that love would stay his guiding force. A place to rest when everything about being alive felt too heavy to carry alone. Two loves. Two completely different origins. One that started in a kitchen before he had any words for what he was. One that started in a grief reading before either of them understood what they were walking into. Neither one ever asked to be compared to the other. Neither one ever needed to be bigger so the other could be smaller. They existed at the same time in different rooms doing different things, and together they built the foundation that Tyler Henry stood on every single time he walked into a room full of strangers and offered them something real. When he finally said it out loud, clearly and without any hedging, he did not make it complicated. He said Clint was the love he chose. He said his mother was the love that made him capable of choosing anything at all. That sentence deserves a moment of silence. Because what it means is this. Without Teresa there is no Hollywood medium. There is no reading on national television. There is no quiet home in Topanga with 2 dogs and a bird. There is no man smiling from a hospital bed after emergency brain surgery telling his followers he has so much to be grateful for. Without her choice in that kitchen, on that ordinary winter morning, none of the extraordinary things that followed ever happened. She did not make him psychic. Nobody made him that. But she made it safe for him to be exactly what he was. And that safety was the thing everything else grew from. Most people spend their whole lives looking for one person who will believe them completely. Tyler Henry found that person before he was old enough to understand how rare she was. He has been saying thank you ever since, in interviews and captions and quiet moments nobody filmed, in the way he shows up for her the same way she showed up for him. At 30 years old, After 2 brain surgeries and a wedding and a family secret that rewrote everything his mother thought she knew about herself, Tyler Henry stopped holding anything back. He looked at the 2 people who had carried him through every version of his life and finally let himself say it without measuring the words first. One love had been sitting across the kitchen table since before he had any language for any of it. The other found him through a stranger's grief and never once let go. And the greatest of those 2 loves, the one that came first, the one that made all the others possible, was never up for debate. It was always his mother. It was always Teresa. The man who made a career out of speaking to the dead was carried through life by someone very much alive. And she had been there, quiet and certain and completely unshakable, from the very first impossible morning. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are lucky enough to still have your mother, you already know exactly what to do next. This was not the only chapter of Tyler Henry's life that most people never heard the full story of. The next video on your screen goes even deeper into the moments that shaped him before the world ever knew his name. Click it. You will not regret it.